الشاعر العربي الأكبر ربما والأشهر، ارتحل يعني عبر الأزمنة وعبر التجارب وعبر الأماكن، ولعل شعره لا يزال حيا بيننا حتى الآن. والدكتور آدم طالب أحد الأعمدة الرئيسيين في قسم الحضارة العربية والإسلامية، هو متخصص في الأدب القديم لكن له إسهامات مهمة في الأدب الحديث أيضا. بالإضافة إلى ذلك هو ترجم 4 روايات مهمة، منها ترجمة البجعة لمكاوي سعيد، وصالح القيصة لخير شلبي، ورواية أخرى لرجاء عالم. أنا لم أقرأ. أهلا وسهلا. تفضل.
Okay. Can we turn down the echo? Is that possible? Is that we have to have we don't.
Is that better? Yeah, that's slightly better. Okay. Although it's not the same at go, it's not the same atmosphere, but okay. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's very kind. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about Al-Mutanabbi because I am sort of responsible for classical Arabic literature in this university, and he is the most famous Arab poet. I think probably that's a fair assessment. And we'll talk a little bit about the legacy of Al-Mutanabbi. But let's just say at the beginning of our conversation, he is the most famous poet of Arabic in about 1400 years. So, earlier Dr. Faryal Ghazul was comparing him to Shakespeare, but really he's much more impressive than Shakespeare. Shakespeare only has about 400 to 500 years with which he's competing. And Al-Mutanabbi is competing with a millennium and a half of poets. So he's a big deal. And I will try and talk about why he's a big deal and talk about some of the issues around whether he is actually as important as people say he is. The reason why I'm talking about Al-Mutanabbi is because the street in Baghdad where the bookmakers congregate, not the bookmakers, the booksellers congregate, is called Shara Al-Mutanabbi. And Al-Mutanabbi is extremely important for Iraqis. He's considered a national icon. He is from Al-Kufa in the south of Iraq. He was born there. This is one of the few historical details about the man's life that we can actually ascertain. So he is a national figure in Iraq, but he's also a pan-Arab figure. Right? He was very famously pro-Arab, anti-Iranian, which is exceptional in certain poets. Abu Nuwas, for example, was pro-Iranian, anti-Arab, so he is considered a nationalist figure, and the figure of Al-Mutanabbi is important for Ba'athist regimes because he was very much a legitimizing figure for a certain model of political power. So we'll get to all of that, but that's essentially why I'm here talking about it. I know it's tangential to the product, to the Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here exhibition, but it's very important to recognize that the name itself carries some weight. It's not only the site of Baghdad's booming book trade, which was decimated because of a series of wars and a sanctions regime and the aftermath of those wars. But when there is a resurgence, and I think probably there is already a resurgence of Iraqi literary culture, Al-Mutanabbi will undoubtedly be, both as a place and as a cultural figure, an important touchstone. I'm going to start by giving you the sort of biographical outline of his life. Some of you may or may know a few of his famous lines, like my shirt. Yeah. So the shirt it says, for those of you who can't read it, فَالْخَيْلُ وَاللَّيْلُ وَالْبِيدَاءُ تَعْرِفُنِي وَالسَّيْفُ وَالرُّمْحُ وَالْقُرْطَاسُ وَالْقَلَمُ. So the night and the horses in the desert all know me, as well as the as well as the sword and the spear and the parchment and the pen, right? So this is the line which is the summation of the Mutanabbi character, right? Now the man himself may not have been such a dynamic figure. We'll get into his biography in a second, but this encapsulates essentially what is known about him in the tradition was that he was extremely brave, physically brave, and bold in his literary style, and extremely egotistical. The thing that we know, everything we know about him, it comes from his poetry, and he is the star of his own poetry, unlike some other poets. unlike some other poets. And he's been criticized for that and also lauded for it. I mean, he gives a lot of material to scholars of literary history because he is such an important character in his own poetry, but a lot of people in the modern reception of Al-Mutanabbi have criticized this. Again, we'll speak about this. Al-Mutanabbi, and we'll talk about the issue of his name. Al-Mutanabbi, as the poet Abu Talib Ahmad ibn Hussein al-Ju'fi is known, lived in a series of very important cultural centers in the 10th century, including Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Iran. A larger-than-life figure, he's justifiably regarded as among the very best poets in Arabic over some 1,400 years of literary history. He's considered by many poorly mistaken people, whom I spend a lot of time trying to disabuse of their prejudices, to mark the beginning of the decline of Arabic literary talent. The common belief among most people, including some scholars, is that after Al-Mutanabbi's death, Arabic, the quality and innovation in Arabic literary production goes steadily downward until what's called the Nahda, or the Arab Renaissance at the end of the 19th century. My scholarly life has been devoted to disabusing people of these prejudices, but it's a commonly held prejudice. And to say that Al-Mutanabbi does not represent the end of innovation, creativity, and talent in Arabic literary production is not to say that he wasn't extremely important. Often in Arabic, we suffer from the quality of the writers. Right? It's very hard to imagine that Al-Mutanabbi wouldn't represent the apex of something, although I think it's demonstrable that he did not. It's strange, perhaps, that a man whose most important poems were written in praise of others, of his patrons, should benefit of a legacy and reputation as venerable as Al-Mutanabbi. But even the uninitiated reader soon detects the overwhelming heroic persona behind the lines. And the heroic persona is what everybody knows. That's the quality of Al-Mutanabbi. Those of you who have seen the exhibition here will see the very regal way Al-Mutanabbi is dressed. He may or may not have been dressed like that, but if you read his poetry, you can only imagine him as a larger-than-life, 8-foot figure. It's not simply that Al-Mutanabbi was larger than life, but rather that he put himself at the center of all his poems. And I'll give you an example of this. Even those in which he was ostensibly lauding the character and qualities of other men. He seemed always to overshadow those men who received his praise. And the two men who received his praise most famously are Saif al-Dawla al-Hamadani and Kafur al-Shidi. Saif al-Dawla ran a small state centered in Aleppo in Syria, and Kafur al-Shidi was a manumitted slave who controlled Egypt from Cairo. He seemed always to overshadow the men who received his praise, even the great Saif al-Dawla, an intellectual and military hero, whom Al-Mutanabbi seemed to consider a worthy equal. And a lot of the most famous lines that you guys know are based around the relationship between these two men. The intense, affectionate, rivalrous relationship between these two men, Al-Mutanabbi and Saif al-Dawla, produced some of the most beautiful poems in Arabic and a paradigm for literary political symbiosis for generations of Arabic political theorists to come. It's not simply that Al-Mutanabbi was praising his patron in poetry. That's an extremely old phenomenon in Arabic. It's a pre-Islamic phenomenon. For example, the poems of An-Nibal al-Dubyani for the Lakhmid kings. It's a habit that once you get the caliphal regime in place, right? So first with the Prophet, Hassan ibn Thabit, and then with the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphs who follow, they all have court poets who praise them. The interesting thing, however, is that Al-Mutanabbi puts himself on the same plane with his patrons, occasionally puts himself above his patron. So when he leaves a patron, he insults his patrons, as he famously did with Kafur al-Shidi. I mean, I didn't bring any of the poems in because they're very dirty and they're very hard to deliver in public. I mean, I do occasionally give them to my students, but they're not something I want recorded or whatever. But he says the most vile things about Egypt and the leader of Egypt. It's important to recognize that a lot of this is there is a certain class and race element, like I said. I mean, Al-Mutanabbi was an extremely proud Arab. He had very rude things to say about non-Arabs, and Kafur was a freed black slave. And that is one of the things that he really hits him with in the poems. But his relationship with Saif al-Dawla, which is this kind of romantic relationship between the really noble Arab military leader in the 10th century, when this is the waning of Arab political power. Right? It is from the 10th century on that the most of the territory in what we call the Arab world will begin to be ruled by a combination of Persians and Turks and other ethnicities for about 800 to 900 years. The 10th century is really this waning of the Abbasid Empire, which represents the last sort of, even though the Abbasid Empire was extremely Persian, it represents the last major Arab political entity in the Arab Middle East. So his relationship with Saif ad-Dawla is taken as the ideal of sort of an authoritarian rule. And the idea of authoritarian rule is that you have an enlightened and successful ruler, right? Part of the problem with authoritarian rule in Egypt is we have neither enlightened nor successful rulers, right? I mean, if we had people like Saif ad-Dawla, it wouldn't be so bad. But the problem is we get very unlucky. And Al-Mutanabbi was the voice of this rule. He was the poet laureate. And what that means is that he was responsible for the official representation of that kingdom. Not only that, he performed a dual role. So he, for example, when Saif ad-Dawla conquered a city, for example, I mean, they have a very famous battle of Hadath, which is one of the most famous battles by Al-Mutanabbi, and certainly one of the best in Arabic. And Al-Mutanabbi memorializes that military victory in verse. Another thing that he does, however, and we will see an example of this now, is that Al-Mutanabbi speaks to Saif ad-Dawla on behalf of this larger body of subjects. Right? So the poet laureate has a twin role. He's not only the official representative of a ruling regime, he is an official channel of society toward the ruling regime. So I think that's an important thing to realize. A lot of my students, when we do talk about Al-Mutanabbi, are uncomfortable with the idea that a poet would write poems for money. Right? This is one of the romantic criticisms of Al-Mutanabbi. Al-Mutanabbi did not write a lot of love poetry, for example. He did not write a lot of poems in praise of the Prophet. He did not write, he tended to write these, what are called madeh in Arabic, or panegyric poems. Panegyric poems in English, although nobody says the word panegyric. They're praise poems. They're poems in praise of a ruler. And he did this, obviously, because that was his responsibility. It was his professional responsibility to speak to the ruler on behalf of his subjects and to speak to the subjects on behalf of the ruler. And my students find that very weird. I mean, they find it strange that a poet or any kind of sincere literary production would come through a commercial transaction, although through a patronage transaction. Of course, that I think is a kind of naive and romantic view, and I try to tell my students it's a bit naive and romantic. But it also misunderstands the function of the poet in society, right? We all have, most of us have been raised with this idea that the poet is a aesthetic genius, right? The poet has no commercial interest, has no worldly interest in life, and is a genius with a sincere inspiration, right? Whereas the Mutanabbi is the exact opposite of that. The Mutanabbi is, the perfect Muhammad Hassan Haykal. I mean, he's a perfect Haykal, right? He is, it doesn't matter who the regime is, he changes with the times, but he is able to put it all together, right? He's able to speak on behalf of the regime and to the regime, and he evolves over time. Now, that's not to say that, Al-Mutanabbi, when my students talk about him, they like to say that he's munafiq, or hypocritical, right? In the sense that he changes his principle, he changes his allegiances, etc. But then, if you're inclined to think that way about a literary artist, especially one in the pre-modern period, I would encourage you to change the standards by which we evaluate artistic production, right? So we're not looking here for the expression of an individual genius, right? I'm not invested in the idea of an individual genius in any period of history, but especially not in this period of history. We're not looking for the work of an individual genius. We're looking for the, let's say, coalescence of social expression in two directions. And you'll see that in a moment. So there's no better model for state propaganda than Al-Mutanabbi's poems in praise of Saif ad-Dawla, which are known as Saifiyat. And one can only wish that today's bootlickers, or mutabbilin in Arabic, had 1 ounce of Al-Mutanabbi's talent. One of the most self-centered of these poems is the poem that Al-Mutanabbi delivered to Saif ad-Dawla when some of his rivals at court spread the false rumor that Al-Mutanabbi had died. And that's the poem that I'm going to leave you with. But before I get there, I'll give you some examples of what I mean about this social expression. So we know that the praise poet is speaking to the ruler, but speaking for the ruler to society. But the poet is often speaking to the ruler on society's behalf. And one occasion of that is when Saif ad-Dawla's mother passes away. This is a very famous very famous poem. Sayf ad-Dawla's mother passes away in, I believe, 948. Yeah, Sayf ad-Dawla's mother passes away in 948, and Al-Mutanabbi writes a poem, an elegy, or ritha in Arabic, on that occasion. And it contains an extremely interesting set of lines about women. I mean, those of you who know the poem will probably know it because of what it says about women. He says, this is from the middle, toward the end of the poem, وَلَوْ كَانَ النِّسَاءُ كَمَنْ فَقَدْنَا. So if all women were like the person we've just lost, لَفُضِلَتِ النِّسَاءُ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ, then all women would be better than men, right? So what's embedded in this idea that men are better than women, but if only all women were as good as your mother, then all women would be better than men. And then there's this very nice, you sort of have to know Arabic grammar to appreciate why it's nice, but it's very nice. وَمَا التَّأْنِيثُ لِإِسْمِ الشَّمْسِ عَيْبٌ وَلَا لِلتَّذْكِيرُ فَخْرٌ لِلْهِلَالِ. So in Arabic, those of you who don't know, the sun is feminine gender. You know, we have, right, the sun is feminine gender and the moon is masculine gender. And so what Al-Mutanabbi says is, it's not, the sun is not ashamed of being feminine in gender, nor should the moon be proud of being masculine in gender. And that's I think the thing that has lasted the longest with this poem, is its commentary on women. But there's quite a lot of other interesting passages. Now, Margaret Larkin, whose book I don't have, I should brought the cover, but she's got a book called Al-Mutanabbi, Voice of the Abbasid Poetic Ideal, which we have here. It's just a short biography, less than 150 pages of Al-Mutanabbi's life. And she is really the expert on Al-Mutanabbi. She was here at AUC a few years ago, giving lectures. And I would encourage any of you who are interested in Al-Mutanabbi and understanding exactly the sort of the political, historical context of his poetry to read that book. It's excellent. And you read it in one sitting, you know, in the same day. There are a couple of interesting lines there. I think the thing to remember, and I've spoken to Margaret about this, and Margaret is convinced, and I'm less convinced, but let me try and represent what she thinks. She believes that Al-Mutanabbi's talent for the quotable line, right, for this quotable line, for example, like this quote, this line I gave you, وَمَا تَأْنِيثُ لِإِسْمِ الشَّمْسِ عَيْبٌ وَلَا تَذْكِيرُ فَخْرٌ لِلْهِلَالِ, right, the sun is not ashamed of being a woman, and the moon shouldn't be proud of itself for being a man. This talent of his to encapsulate what's called in Arabic hikmah, or wisdom, in one line, which you can repeat at parties and stuff like that. And I think some of you probably have lines of Al-Mutanabbi memorized. I'm not a great one for memorizing lines of his poetry, but I know this one, for example, right? فَالْخَيْلُ وَاللَّيْلُ وَالْبِدَاءُ. There's some other ones like مَا لِي يُكَتِمُ حُبًّا قَدْ بَلَ جَسَدِي فَتَدَّعِي حُبَّ السَّيْفِ دَوْلَةِ الْأُمَمُ. You know, these are just lines of Al-Mutanabbi that one memorized. I'm sure Dr. Rasul knows some, and Dr. Hussein knows some, and you know, he had a particular talent for giving us these quotable lines, right? And quotable lines are extremely important in Arabic, but they're important as well in earlier English language culture. Nowadays it's not that impressive, although there is a subculture of 20-year-old men who like to quote movies. I don't know if you guys know this, but I mean, that's very much a thing that bros do, which is you quote movies. Right? Somehow it is a similar kind of thing. Now, Margaret is convinced that Al-Mutanabbi sort of starts this major trend toward the quotable 1 or 2 or 3 line poem. And that's what I work on, and so that's why I have spoken with her about it. I'm not as convinced because obviously there are other lines, you know, by Abu Tumam. Abu Tumam was also very quotable, La anta anta wa la dioru, or, you know, etc. So I'm not convinced that, but I think he did have an extremely important role in spreading this idea of versified wisdom in a very short and movable, right, short and portable wisdom. And there are some really great lines, for example, from this poem. So this is from Larkin's translation. Who has not loved this world from of old, but there is no path to union. Your share of the beloved during your lifetime is like your share of a phantom during your sleep. So let me read the Arabic for that. نصيبك في حياتك من حبيب نصيبك في منامك من خيالي. And this is all based on this Arabic idea of the tayf al-khiyal. So this is the lover that comes to you in your sleep, right? So, you know, it's like a dream, although there is something about, you know, it's considered to be more concrete or real than a dream. And these are the kinds of lines that Al-Mutanabbi excelled in. Now, why does he excel in this? Well, even those of you who don't know Arabic can appreciate the parallelism, right? نصيبك في حياتك من حبيب. نصيبك في منامك من حلال. Sorry, من خيال. Right? You see, I mean, there's very strict syntactic parallelism. This is one of the things that he excelled at. Yeah, and then there are other things which are just more, I would say, along the lines of, in Arabic it's called wa'ad, or exhortatory poetry. So poetry which is reflective of this idea that your life is ephemeral and you should prepare yourself for the everlasting afterlife, etc. So lines like, the poem begins with the line, "We make ready swords and lances." Of course, Sayyid Talib was a great military leader. "We make ready swords and lances, and death slays us without a battle." The Arabic is نعد المشرفية والعوالي وتقتلنا المنون بلا قتال. Right? تقتلنا المنون بلا قتال. We station the swift steeds near our tents, but they do not deliver from the ambling of the knights. نرتبط السوابق مقربات وما ينجينا من خرب الليالي. The idea that death comes like خرب الليالي, right? Creeping in at night, stuff like this. Yes. Now, I wonder how much time we have, because I want to discuss the other poem. So I'll just give you one more line from this poem, which is very famous, and unfortunately, I don't believe it's all being translated into English, and I haven't done one myself, but maybe I'll do that if you're interested. Yeah. So in the translation, it reads, "May the blessings of God." This is talking about his mother now, right? "May the blessings of God, our Creator, be the perfume upon the face shrouded in beauty." So the metaphor here obviously is this idea that the woman who was living was veiled, and now that she's dead, as you know, she's wrapped in what's called a kafan, or a winding sheet, but they don't cover the face. But anyway, that's not important. "Upon one who, out of chastity, was buried before being buried in the dust, and entombed in noble qualities before the tomb, how many an eye, once covered in kisses, now wears mascara of stone and sand." Hold on, sorry. I just need to find it. Okay. ويدفن بعضنا بعضا وتمشي أواخرها على حلم الأوالي وكم عين مقبلة النواحي كحيل بالجنادر والرمال. So mascara of stone and sand. This is creative ideology. It's one of, it's considered very talented. If you're very talented if you can come up with metaphors like this. And Al-Mutanabbi excelled in this regard. The poem I want to really focus on today, and I'm going to give you a musical intermission. So, Fayyan was kind enough to share this.
لا أهل ولا وطن ولا نديم ولا كأس ولا سكر لا أهل ولا وطن ولا نديم ولا كأس ولا سكن أريد من زمني ذا يبلغني أريد من زمني ذا يبلغني ما ليس يبلغ من نفسي بالزمن بما.
Okay. So maybe you heard the first two lines of the poem, maybe you understood them not, but anyway, one of the most self-centered of these praise poems is the poem that Al-Mutanabbi delivered to Saif al-Dawla when Al-Mutanabbi's rivals at court spread the false rumor that Al-Mutanabbi had been killed. For all but 3 lines of this 25-line poem, Al-Mutanabbi is the subject. Front and center, he speaks on his own behalf, and in doing so, he reveals his personal philosophy, or rather to be more exact, his idealized self. The poem only turns to praise Al-Mutanabbi's new patron, Kafur al-Khshidi, the ruler of Egypt, toward the very end. But one remember, the implication of Al-Mutanabbi's praise poems is always, right, and this is the thing I think that we should all remember that the implication, the implied philosophy of his poetry is that the poet's character and genius is as much a testament to the patron's qualities as the poem itself. Right? It doesn't do to receive praise from someone who isn't worthy of giving praise. And this is, this is what perhaps today's tyrants do not understand. If someone like Mustafa Bakri says nice things about you, that actually makes you look worse. Right? So, okay. I want to read the poem in Arabic, and then I'll read you my translation. So bear with me, it's 25 lines. بما التعلل لا أهل ولا وطن ولا نديم ولا كأس ولا سكن أريد من زمني ذا أن يبلغني ما ليس يبلغه من نفسه الزمن. Notice I'm not taking any breaths, because when the classical Arabic authors tell us that you shouldn't take any breaths when you're reading a line of Arabic poetry. لا تلق ظهرك إلا غير مبترد ما دام يصحب في روحك البدن فما يديم سرورا ما سررت به ولا يرد عليك الفائت الحزن مما ضر بأهل العشق أنهم حووا right? وما عرفوا الدنيا وما فطنوا تفني عيونهم دمعا وأنفسهم في إثر كل قبيح وجهه حسن تحملوا حملتكم كل ناجية فكل بين علي اليوم مؤتمن ما في حوادجكم من مهجتي عوض إن مت شوقا ولا فيها لها ثمن يا من نعيت على بعد بمجلسه كل بما زعم النعون مرتهن كم قد قتلت وكم قد مت عندكم ثم انتفضت فزال القبر والكفن قد كان شاهد الدفن قبل قولهم جماعة ثم ماتوا قبل من دفنوا ما كل ما يتمنى المرء يدركه تجري الرياح بما لا تشتهي السفن رأيتكم لا يصون العرض جاركم ولا يدر على مرعاكم اللبن جزاء كل قريب منكم ملل وحظ كل محب منكم الضغن تغضبون على من نال رفدكم حتى يعاقبه تنغيص والمنن والمنن Okay, I have to check that. Sorry. فغادر الهجر ما بيني وبينكم يحماء تكذب فيها العين والأذن تحبو الرواسم من بعد رسيم بها تسأل الأرض عن إخفافها الثفن إني أصاحب حلمي وهو بي كرم ولا أصاحب حلمي وهو بي جبل ولا أقيم على مال أذل به ولا ألذ بما عرضي به درن سهرت بعد رحيلي وحشة لكم ثم استمر مليلي ورع والوسن وإن بليت بود مثل ودكم فإنني بفراق مثله طمن أبلى الأجلة مهري عند غيركم وبدل العذر بالفسطاط والرسن عند الهمام أبي المسك الذي غرقت في جوده مدر الحمراء واليمن وإن تأخر عني بعض موعده فما تأخر أمالي ولا تهن هو الوفي ولكني ذكرت له مودة فحوى يبلوها ويمتحن. Okay. In English, slightly longer in English, surprisingly. What's left to divert me? No family, no homeland, no one to drink with, nothing to drink from, nowhere to live. I want fate to give me what fate itself has failed to attain. Take it from me. Don't confront fate unless you're totally indifferent, not as long as your body and soul are one. Fate will never give you more of the thing that makes you happy, nor will it ever give you another shot at something you were grieved to lose. The problem with lovers is that they fall in love without knowing the way of the world nor what it reeks. Their eyes are dissolved in tears, as are their souls, for every ugly soul with a pretty face they meet. Every swift she-camel has borne away your burden, and now every separation is entrusted to me. Nothing in your camel litters can take the place of my heart should I die of passion, nor can you afford to pay the price of compensation. You in whose presence they announced my death when I was absent, everything the death messenger said is guaranteed. How many times have I been murdered? How many times have I died among you all only to rise again, my grave and winding shroud turning to naught? Those who swore they'd seen me buried have each died before the one they laid to rest. A man can never gain everything he hopes for. The winds blow contrary to what ships wish. I've studied you all. Your neighbors don't give a damn about your good name, and milk flows only stingily from your herd. Whoever grows close to you is rewarded with boredom, and any who loves you, his fortune is spite. You resent any to whom you give a gift, and in return for his gratitude, he receives offense. Separation has left a wayless desert between you and me, in which even one's eyes and ears do deceive. The camels, treading heavily, creep forward over the surface, and the earth asks their calluses about camel hooves. My only companion is perseverance, and it's a blessing, but I wouldn't waste a moment on it if I were steadfastly a coward. I never continue taking money that debases me, and I never take pleasure in anything that sullies my honor. Soon after I left, I lay awake missing you, but then I pulled myself together and sleep returned anew. If affection like yours should befall me again, then I deserve yet another separation like this one. My colt was worn out in the service of someone else, and its reins and its halters were exchanged in fustat with the prince Abul Misk, Kafur, right? The prince Abul Misk, whose generosity has drowned red Mudar in Yemen. If any of his promises ever come late, my hopes are never postponed, nor do they ever slacken. Now, granted, the English translation doesn't make it particularly easy to understand all that he's doing there, but I think you probably get some idea that it's an intensely biographical poem. The poet is always front and center, and there is this idea of diversified wisdom. There's this repeatable, these lines that you can repeat in company. I think the interesting thing here is that he starts the poem with this idea, bima ta'allulu. Okay, what's left to divert me? لا أهل ولا وطن ولا نديم ولا كأس ولا سكن. No family, no homeland, no one to drink with, nothing to drink from, nowhere to live. And so in many ways, because he was itinerant, because Al-Mutanabbi, who was born in Iraq, traveled to Syria and to Egypt and then to Iran, and he was actually killed in the desert, the desert between Iran and Iraq and Khuzestan when he was returning to Iraq. Because he was itinerant, he actually is a figure of exile. Certainly in this poem, he's a figure of exile. And he says, for example, when he first left Syria, soon after I left, I lay awake missing you, but then I pulled myself together and sleep returned anew. So not only is he a figure of exile, but he's a figure of this very proud exile, right? I mean, he confesses to having some affection still for what he left behind, and what he left behind here is Sayyid ad-Dawla, right? This, the intense object of his literary affection. But it's the itinerance that gives us an idea of his figure of exile. But the other thing I think that is maybe more important, the thing I want to leave you with, is this idea that a poet, an official member of an entourage in the 10th century, could express something like genuine grief and genuine mourning for the death of his patron's mother. Right? And the idea that you have, this is a very common idea in Arabic poetry, but you get it again in this poem that Al-Mutanabbi says. He says that, these people who have told you that I've died, right? They were correct. They're right. I will eventually die. Right? They've not lied. Okay? But then he says, they're all dead, I'm still alive. How many times have you guys killed? How many times have you guys spread rumors that I've been dead and I've risen from the grave and all this kind of stuff? But the thing is, this kind of what I want to call surrogate mourning, right? So this is the role of the poet laureate, it is surrogate mourning. It's also surrogate celebration, right? When something good happens, he's also there to celebrate, but it's this idea of surrogate mourning. So for someone like me, who's not, for example, Iraqi or Syrian, one has there's always this moment of doubt when it comes to mourning someone else's tragedy, right? And I know the idea behind Al-Mutanabbi Street Stars here is the idea is that books are a global phenomenon, literacy is a global right, we all share in it. An attack on one book market in Baghdad is an attack on the production and freedom of knowledge everywhere. But at the same time, one has to be careful about the appropriateness of one's emotions and the context in which one expresses those emotions. But I take some inspiration from someone like Al-Mutanabbi, who was able to perform a role, even if the role here is not what we traditionally expect, the sincere expression of grief, right? It is sincere grief, but it's not personal grief. And I take some consolation in that, and I think that it's probably better when we are facing the horrors of the modern world to apply a pre-modern philosophy, right? So it's not that I have to directly suffer from a tragedy. And it's not that I'm opportunistically sitting in my house in my pajamas sharing pictures of destruction in Syria, right, on Facebook, and feeling torn about what I'm doing. Am I doing nothing? Am I doing something? Am I a voyeur? Right? Am I being opportunistic in my expression of grief? Am I making this about myself? Well, yes, we are making these things about ourselves, right? And Al-Mutanabbi was also making these things about ourselves. We are subjects. We see things through our own eyes. But we can actually perform roles, even if we're not the direct inheritors of, let's say, of subjects of grief, even if we're not the direct victims of catastrophe. If we can express what everyone is feeling, right? If we can channel those feelings of grief for a larger audience, for ourselves, for the people around us, and if we can, obviously, it's a further and more ambitious goal, but if we can do so in a form that lasts for more than 1,000 years, then we've done something, right? So it's not about being petty and individual. It's about finding a way to channel our own emotions and respecting the fact that we're individuals with our own subjective emotions, but to find a language for communal grief or communal emotion in general. But I think the point of the Al-Mutanabbi Street starts here, and the past several years in the Middle East is that we have a lot of communal grief. There's other kinds of communal emotions, but let's focus on communal grief. If we can find a way of expressing communal grief as individuals for the purpose of a wider community, even if that community is imagined, right? Al-Mutanabbi was writing for this wider Arabic-speaking community. He didn't know all of them, right? He was trying to write for kind of, I want to say, literary history in a way. Then there's something to that. But in order to do that, we have to get out of our very narrow understanding of what emotional expression is. Right? And that's what I think the point of the Al-Mutanabbi Street's project is, that universities across the world, not just universities, but cultural centers across the world can share, not in an opportunistic fashion, right, but in a sincere and localized way, a similar experience. So it's not just a tragedy that happens in Baghdad, and it's not just those of us in Cairo feeling sorry for people in Baghdad, because, well, one should be careful. We might find ourselves in similar situations. But it's really, it's a broader, and I think emotionally sincere expression of solidarity, literary solidarity. Okay, and I'm going to stop here. Before I leave you, I just want to say, on Monday, April the 7th, Melanie Carter, who is a poet and a senior instructor in the Department of Rhetoric and Composition, will give a presentation called Imagining the Book Student Initiatives, here at the same place, this Monday at 1 p.m. Thank you very much. No, what do you mean? Al-Mutanabbi, you mean?
Yeah, like why?
Well, this was a suggested topic. But I take every opportunity to talk about Arabic poetry. I've never said, and nobody's ever asked me to talk about Arabic poetry, and I've never said no. So long as I've got blood in my veins, I will talk about Arabic poetry to any audience. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
I have a question. I have many of my students here. We're doing world literature. And one of the things we studied is animal stories by animals, like Pantra Tantra, Galileo and Dinah, and then a reference to La Fontaine, fables, and Animal Farm, things like that. So this is kind of world literature in the sense that you can find it in different literatures as well. And I was struck, of course, by the poem on your shirt that mentions al-sayf wal-qalam, the sword and the pen. Okay? And this is very much what we know about Al-Mutanabbi. At the same time, the idea of the sword and the pen figures out in media, in Western literature. There's even a book by Edward Said called The Sword and the Pen and so on. Is this also taken, you think, from Al-Mutanabbi, or is it just sort of universal? You are contrasting force, physical force, with intellectual power.
I mean, it's very old. The sword and the pen motif in Arabic is very old, and I believe it's traced back to. There is a saying by Ali ibn Abi Talib, which has something. Sorry, I don't know. There is a saying by Ali ibn Abi Talib, but I don't know if that's where the origin of it is. And Ibn Ubaydah has a munadara in the 14th century, munadara to sayf wal qalam. So it is. I mean, that's after Al-Mutanabbi. I don't know if it's taken directly from him. I would have to look in Kutub al-Ma'ani. which a lot of them predate the Mutanabbi, to know. But I expect it doesn't. And it may actually be older than Arabic. I mean, it may be I don't know. It may be an antique motif rather than a medieval motif.
And what about in the West when they use it? I mean, it's a common thing.
So yeah, definitely. I don't know whether that comes from Latin or from Greek, or I don't know. I mean, I doubt that comes from Latin. But it makes perfect sense, right? Okay, if there are no more questions, I thank you and I can dismiss you to your classes.